Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, helping people to achieve their life goals with Philip Lancaster. We talk about how money is almost a taboo dinner table topic, delivering financial education masterclasses in schools, and his tendency to flee the country when big decisions need to be made.
Phil has been described as a modern-day saint, a redhead version of Ryan Gosling, and an everyday superhero. All by his mum, so we're told, who we assume loves him unconditionally and hasn't yet listened to this podcast. In reality, Phil is someone who didn't know what he wanted to be when he was younger, and has taken time out to travel and enjoy himself at important stages in his life, before jumping into university, jobs, and uprooting his long-suffering wife to move back up north. As a financial advisor, Phil is passionate about financial education at an early stage, supporting young entrepreneurs and professionals who may have never thought about planning, and helping charities with both his expertise and his time.
So good morning to you, Philip. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I've had a good morning. Been out walking the dog, and been out on the beach, so it's been nice. How about you guys?
Good.
Not bad, yeah. We took Oliver to rugby camp and
Had a McDonald's breakfast.
yeah, give us some energy for the day. Start as you mean to go on. We'll get more of a walk later, I think.
Yes.
Burn off the calories.
Do a triathlon.
Right then, Philip. First question: when you were little, did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
No, is the very simple answer to that one. I think I was trying to think of things that I did want to be, but they were all quite boring, like be a farmer or be an accountant. But really, I didn't have a clue, and I still didn't have a clue when I was kind of 20, 22 either. So because when you're at school, you just focus on your exams and what's happening next, and you never kind of forward plan. So I never really had a plan growing up. I had things that I liked to do. So I liked being outside, I liked football, and I wanted to be rich. But I wasn't good enough to be a footballer to combine all of those interests. So I was really struggling. But I did try a few things. So along those lines of kind of football, outdoors, and trying to get rich. So I did a referees course, thinking, well, if I can't be a footballer, what else could I be in the realms of sport? Looked at a career in sports journalism. And then for my work experience, rather than following that train of thought and actually finding out what I wanted to do, I did a week's work experience in an architect's practice and decided actually working wasn't for me at all. It was horrendous. It was the most soul-destroying week I've ever had. Which I don't think it's supposed to be. I think they're supposed to build you up and help you in work experience. But pretty much everyone in the office said, I've just got loads of debt from university and this is me for the next 20, 30 years. And it was pretty soul destroying at that point in time.
Okay. What did you do then?
So after getting all my exams, I just fled the country. So I went to New Zealand for a year was the plan. Because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had exam fatigue of people asking you what you wanted to be and what did you think you were going to do with your life. So I signed up to all these crazy kind of gap year programs, not really reading what they were doing, as long as they promised me a plane ticket somewhere more exotic. Signed up to one that said New Zealand, which sounded great and it was amazing, but basically, my parents bought me a Lonely Planet on the way to the airport when they were dropping me off. And I actually looked up whereabouts in New Zealand I was supposed to be staying for the year because I hadn't done any research or planned anything. I was just dead set keen on trying something completely different and seeing where it ended up. And it's probably one of the best years of my life, looking back on it, because it was unplanned and everything was new. And it was new to everyone else as well. So all these other people doing gap years that I met on the plane when I eventually got to the school I was working in. So I'd highly recommend if you're stuck and don't know what to do, just do nothing. Go away and do something out of the ordinary. Take some time out and have a think, because that was the ideal for me. And at the end of that year, I did actually want to have a career, go to university, and actually progress and use my intellect a bit more as well. Because I spent a year driving a van around and ferrying kids to sports practices, to doctor's appointments, to dentists. And I decided that's not what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So at least I knew what I didn't want to do, which gave me more of an idea of actually how do I now get those goals of working outdoors, enjoying my football and having some money to have that flexibility.
Mm. So we presume you came back from New Zealand. What was after that?
Well, I almost didn't come back because there was the option to go to university in New Zealand. So New Zealand's fantastic. So I lived in the south, at the very south of the country is a place called Invercargill, which nobody visits in their camper van when they're traveling there for the reason that there's not much there and it is a lot colder. So they were offering foreign students the opportunity to study there for free. And my dad did suggest, well, if you're enjoying it there and you love the country, why don't you just stay there and stay for another 4 years, which I'm sure was out of love and out of respect that he wanted me to stay. but I didn't. I already had a place at uni in Scotland and I was keen to do that. So almost didn't come back. And to be honest, looking back, the advice I would have given myself was actually probably try something completely different again, because that's the times when I've been most happy, when I haven't followed the kind of conventional routes and I've done something a bit different.
So what was it you studied in Scotland?
So on the theme of getting rich, I thought if I studied economics, then that would tell me how to get rich. Mm-hmm. And it really doesn't. It doesn't teach you anything practical, in all honesty. It's very mathematical and science-based. And that was 2004 to 2008. And obviously having had 4 years of hearing what happens in the real economy and what's supposed to happen, it all blew up with the financial crisis. And trying to get a job in 2008 and explain why 4 years of studying wasn't relevant whatsoever was quite interesting.
Oh, wow. Yes. I remember that. Not fun.
Yeah, it wasn't fun at the time, but it was definitely good and character building, because I had a graduate program all lined up then. And actually trying to get that graduate scheme was probably one of the hardest things. I don't know how you guys found getting jobs, but no one told me that it's not about how interesting or funny you are in an interview. It's actually like a scoring mechanism. And it took me a year to work that out. And I used to come out of interviews thinking, I've nailed this. I've spoken to this partner from Ernst & Young or wherever I was going for an interview, and we've got on amazingly. We both own a unicycle. I know his favorite color. We've had a great chat about his kids. And basically looking back on it, I must have scored 0 points in that interview because I basically didn't answer any questions. I didn't have that pre-prescribed formula. And I still think it's a bad way to interview people, because you only employ people who are basically gaming the system. You don't know anything about the people whatsoever. You don't know if they're a good fit for your organization. You just know that they've been clever enough to Google, how do I pass an interview? And someone's taught them about the scoring that works. So actually the one job I did get when I went to London, I'm quite argumentative and I can be quite confrontational at times. To a lesser extent now, but when I was 18, I was very much like that, my 20s, and I was having a confrontation with my boss, and he told me that he was like, one of the questions he asked was, why do you think you got this job? And I was like, because I'm fantastic. I've done 4 years at St Andrews University. I've got an economics first-class degree. I'm approachable. I've got empathy. And he's like, no. He was like, I just took pity on you. He's like, your answers to the interview questions were horrendous. He was like, the job you applied for, you had no idea what you were going for. But he's like, I just thought you were quite funny. So actually, it did work in the end. But he made pity on you.
Like, we need a jester in here. Let's bring one in. Oh, hilarious.
So working in 2008 was good. So I was on a proper graduate scheme for banking. Basically, when I moved down to London and got there, they basically told us that the graduate scheme had been scrapped. So all this planning of kind of rotations across different areas, and you'll find out all the bits about banking that you like and what you don't like. They were like, no, it doesn't exist anymore. So I was in an office and they were like, you're at the mercy of your boss now as to what he wants to do with you. If he wants to let you do some fun things and go and work on the trading floor for a bit, he will. But if he doesn't like you, then you're stuck doing a 9 to 5 admin role.
Oh, wow.
So it was a bit challenging.
So I'm assuming that they did like you?
Well, that, or I was just so confrontational, they were happy to get me out and send me across.
Like, go somewhere else.
Yeah. I kept asking questions and they were like, just send them somewhere else. So it was a bit of a mix of both. And I think as well, my advice for people starting careers and getting jobs is to beware your line manager, because they're either going to help you in your career massively or they're going to hold you back.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter if you're the best person in your job. If you've got a line manager who's going to hold you back, they'll hold you back because they know that you're good at your job and they'll just keep you at that level.
Yeah.
So you've got to actually go out and talk to other people in the industry, in your workplace, and form those other relationships.
It's true.
It's interesting, all the things that you weren't taught, that whole how to behave at work, how to get a job, all that sort of stuff. It's kind of, fundamental information that people should be teaching, surely.
So yes, so that's a good point, is that one thing that they do teach you in school is how to pass an exam. So how to learn something and repeat it, which used to apply in the workplace if you wanted to be a good employee in the 1990s. But in today's environment, it's unlikely that you're going to stay in one firm repeating one task for the next 30 years. And if you do, you're probably not going to enjoy life, let's be honest.
No.
So in school at the moment, I am going into schools and I am delivering a financial education masterclass. And a lot of the academies are switched on to actually teaching people to prepare for the real world. But you're right, they don't teach you human interaction, human behavior. And there isn't that kind of additional career path of what about if you want to be entrepreneurial? What about if you want to do something completely different that doesn't exist and you want to combine getting rich with playing football or watching football and being outside? What does that career look like? And I think they're going to have to adapt schools and universities in particular, because it's a lot of money to go to university. And again, you're just continuing that myth of learning and repeating. And so there might be something different that sets up in terms of like an entrepreneurial college or some kind of class that teaches you the basics of business, how to set up a limited company, a sole trader, what that actually means, what it means for your business, how to employ people, how to engage and lead people. Because leadership shouldn't be a thing that you get taught in your 30s, 40s when you suddenly progress to the role of having to manage someone and then they teach you to be a good leader. They should teach you how to lead other people and motivate people from the very beginning as well. So yeah, schools in the exam system only gets you so far, really. And it's in the workplace, or if you've got your own business, what are you as a person? And that's only something that you seem to learn, or I learned kind of 10 years too late.
No, definitely. I know a lot of sort of independent sort of psychologist type humans, and it's amazing that we know all the psychology stuff, but we don't know necessarily, never been taught how to run a business, how to do any of that sort of charging for stuff. We're psychologists. We shouldn't, we're psychologists for the good of mankind, not to make money. So it's just like, yes, how many conversations can you have to say you have to charge for this? It's funny.
Same for a lot of professions, though. I think you taught almost the theory or how to deliver it, but not the practical. It's almost that you were expected to have a job then, working as a psychologist or a massage therapist or whatever it is, but not to say, well, how do I go out to markets? How do I set up an entity? What does that actually mean? What insurance do I need? How do I market myself? So it's a crucial bit that's missing, isn't it?
Definitely. Okay, so you're working in banking. During the financial crash, you managed to make yourself as much of a nuisance as possible, so you could get some extra experience in different areas. Then what was next?
Yeah, so at the time I'd finished my graduate program and there's some obvious career paths. And one of the themes that I have is that when I need to make a decision, I end up making no decision and just try and escape. So I convinced my wife, then girlfriend, that she should quit her job as well and we should go traveling. So she did that, and we were going to move to Australia, and I'd forgotten that I had already had an Australian working visa, so I couldn't go back and work there. So at that point, I didn't tell her that first. I kind of found out and thought, oh, what should I do? Rather than thinking of, I've made her quit a job and start planning this experience in Australia. So I applied for a job in London and got that and got really excited about it. And luckily she was quite good and calm about things and said, all right, I'll get another job here as well and carry on until you work out where you can live in the world and what we can do. So I applied for a job again in banking, but with a bank called Coutts, which again, I had no experience. I'd done no research on them. It just sounded quite cool.
The fancy one.
Yeah, the one with the thanks to the royal family, apparently. So it says on Wikipedia, and lots of other celebrities. So what's not to like about that? It's pretty good. And loved my time there. So the first job I had was working on a bank of desks. It was called business development, but there was no going out and doing things. Basically, the phone would ring and people would ask to be a client of the bank, and I would tell them no.
That's great. It's like, oh no, you're not rich enough for us.
Yeah, that was exactly the conversation. So the first conversation I'd have to have with whoever rang in was, well, how much money have you got? In a nice way. There were some kind of softer questions than that, but that was really what I was trying to get out of them.
What's the minimum? I've always wanted to know the answer to this question.
To be a client of Coutts, you historically used to have £1 million of investable wealth. Oh, wow. So £1 million that you could demonstrate that you were able to bring across to the bank realistically. Cool. But I think that stance has softened somewhat because the banking's a big part of their artillery now as well. So things like mortgages you can get in as well. But it used to have some great perks. They still do in terms of offering great seminars and conferences and benefits, whether you're an entrepreneur, professional. They split their client bank to try and get more things in common so that the bankers can actually talk to you and deliver you better service as well. So it's a cool place to work. And again, being me, I wasn't quite happy just sitting on a desk and talking to people who rang in. Usually they rang in after X Factor. So X Factor would happen. And then the people who were on X Factor would obviously talk to each other. And someone who'd done well would say, oh, I've got a Coutts account. So they'd all call up and say, oh, can I have one? And I was like, oh, well, you finished 10th on X Factor. I'm not sure you're going to qualify for £1 million of investable wealth. I was very arrogant in those days, telling other people about, their lack of wealth.
It's like, that lady out of the Pretty Woman. It's like, you can't afford it.
That was me. I was the shop assistant.
Yeah, so then they win the lot. Yeah, so it's like, oh, I've got loads of money now. Big mistake.
Remember me, Philip? Well, you can go spit because I'm taking my money elsewhere. I'm going to Goldman, I'm going to JP Morgan or some other bank. Any bank. Your loss.
Newcastle Building Society, up yours.
Yeah, I hope there's a podcast somewhere where someone does mention me by name, saying, "Yeah, that was the turning point in my career."
Oh, and it's like it's advice to, have you got anything to say anyone out there in the world? Yeah, actually, there is. Before I made my 10 million or whatever it was, I couldn't get an account at Coutts, and I just wanted to say a shout out to Philip who turned me down. You gave me the motivation to get out there and make my fortune. Maybe. In the acknowledgement of a book section. Yeah. Philip shot me down and gave me the ammunition to crack on.
So, how long were you at Coutts?
So I was there for, I think it was about 4 or 5 years. And for the majority of that time, I had a job as an executive assistant. So again, it's one of those jobs that isn't taught in school. If you said, oh, I want to be someone's assistant, people would look at you and be like, oh, well, I'm not quite sure what that involves or what qualifications you need. Basically, as being someone's executive assistant was doing all of the jobs that they didn't want to do and managing relationships, which for someone like me was ideal. So everyone wants time with the person I was working with. And it was my job to kind of field those, understand what they're trying to get, talk to them, and put things in the diary that were relevant. And it's quite, for someone quite young, it was a job with a lot of responsibility as well, a lot of exposure to very senior people and everything that's going on in banking. So I would see kind of HR, finance, day-to-day client interactions. It's part of a big group as well. Coutts is part of the RBS group, or NatWest now. So the interactions with the different elements of the bigger bank as well. So it was amazing. And I did that for 3 years and used to work ridiculous hours, but because I enjoyed it. And I didn't mind getting up at kind of 5 a.m. and getting home at kind of 11, 12 at night, because I really enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed that stress element of work. In this, I still do. I need that buzz and that kind of excitement in what I do. But I don't think it was a career for me forever. I think people can make it into a career, but I don't think I have that kind of ambition. And I didn't want to work for somebody else all of my life as well, which is why I made that change at the time.
So when you start to have those thoughts, I'm not sure this is where I want to be forever, what did you kind of think of and look to as the next step, I suppose?
Yeah, so as with any other decision, I panicked and fled the country. So I did have a long think about what it is I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. And at that point I was married, so my wife then was very understanding. I'd already disappointed her once not moving to Australia, so I then convinced her to quit her job again and decide what it is that we should both be doing. And she was very good about that. So newly married, I said, let's quit our jobs, throw everything up in the air, rather than work defining us and us saying, actually, we live in Wimbledon because we both work in the city and have these jobs. If we didn't have the jobs, where would we live and what would we do? And I think that's more important than actually fitting everything around your role. So I said, we'll only find out what we want to do if we pack everything up and we've got no responsibilities. So we rented out our flats, gathered up our savings, and then just went traveling. And the mistake we made was going to the most expensive countries. So we went to Switzerland to start with, which wasn't cheap, but it was great. And so went traveling there, had a break back in the UK for some summer weddings, and then went to America and basically overstayed our welcome there with friends, and that outlasted our funds as well. So we ran out of money, ran out of any kind of people we could stay with, because we'd all stayed there far too long, and basically came back to London and had no money and no place to live and no jobs. And I think at that point it was, looking back, it was probably quite daunting, but it was actually quite good. And we did make a checklist, which I should have kept. And we did a kind of a scoring of, if you could live anywhere, where would you live? And marked it out with quality of life, quality of experience, work-life balance, all the things that people tell you should be important, but you never actually sit down and do. And basically we picked Newcastle. well, Sunderland to be precise. But we didn't last long in Sunderland. We had to move north of the river.
So Sunderland/Newcastle. To do what? What was next?
So my big idea was that I wanted to repair bikes. That was I've never even like changed a tire on a bike in my life, but I wanted to repair bikes. But again, I realized probably needed some money in the short term. So I got a short-term job, again in banking, and my wife got a job back in accountancy, which was the two things we'd left to go and follow our life's ambitions, do whatever you want. You can change jobs. And we ended up in the exact same things that we'd left. So I then tried a few other things, tried a few other businesses, bit of an energy brokerage. I was talking to some football agents at the time. That sounded like a really cool job. And really liked setting up a business. That was a really good experience in terms of what does it look like? What can you get distracted with? Because setting up a business, I realized I'm great at being distracted. I'll spend hours working out how to set up a website and how to take pictures. But actually growing a business is really hard and takes a lot of time and effort. And basically ended up combining the two. So I decided I like working for myself, but I need a job that I enjoy. And so I went back into finance. So that's why I'm now a self-employed financial advisor. I get that benefit of growing a business and doing whatever I want, speaking to whoever I want, combined with my passion, which is actually talking about finance and hearing other people's stories about how they got rich and what they wanted to do. Exactly what your podcast is intended about. Where did you come from? What are you doing? And what are people's future plans? To me, that's the most exciting thing talking about is, what do you want to do? Because again, at school, we always look at the kind of next 6 months, 12 months in terms of exams, and in jobs, it's the next promotion. But we never say, well, when do you want to stop work? Or what happens when kids leave home? Where do you want to go on holiday? What else do you want to achieve in life? And sometimes that can be the most difficult thing to put your finger on.
What is it, do you think then, so with financial advising, what is it? Obviously there's a bit you said, the element of finance, investments, something that interests you. Is there something else on the human side of you helping someone else to grow their wealth? Is there something around that as well?
Yeah, it's not so much growing their wealth. The bit that it's important to me is matching whatever I do for them with that goal. So you're right. You could invest with myself, and I'll come out to you every year, James, and I'll say, this year we've done 5%. Your money's grown 5%. And to be honest, that's quite meaningless, because is 5% good? Is it bad? It only makes a difference if I can help you achieve what your goal was. So if that goal is, in 5 years' time, I need to move to a bigger house because family's getting older, the kids getting older, we want some outdoor space, or we need to move closer to a school where there's a catchment area. If I can help you achieve that, that's the goal. And therefore, an investment becomes relevant. An investment isn't the starting point, because nobody ever comes to me and says, Phil, I need an ISA, or Phil, I need a pension.
Mm-hmm.
What they want is, they say, well, actually, I don't want to work forever. How can I get out of working by the time I'm 50? And therefore, you need to set money aside for future goals and aims.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that works across everything. And a lot of what I do isn't for people. A lot of my clients are fairly young, I would say, in terms of kind of that 20 to 40 bracket. And a lot of their goals are for other people. So it's for kids, especially. I want to be able to support my kids, need that financial flexibility that should something happen to them or we need some money, we can always support them. And then at age 18, they always want to give them the benefits that they've had, whether that's university costs or buying their first house, weddings, or just unplanned expenditure, like getting them a car, something nice. And the earlier you save for those goals, the more realistic it becomes. That's effectively how finance works. You contribute, you can either get there by contributing lots, or the investment performance is fantastic. And hopefully it's a combination of the two.
So we've talked earlier about, we're not really taught about who we are, perhaps our strengths, what we might be good at, and not following the system. Now, you're doing things in schools, obviously. I think something we're not really taught about is money. How to, it's not just a case of I buy a house, I pay that off, and then, I've got some wealth to my name by the time I'm 65. Is that still prevalent today, I suppose, with the 20 to 40-year-old bracket, that we're not really that savvy when it comes to planning financially for goals?
Definitely. I think the 18 to kind of 30 bracket, for me, is really interesting because they are financially savvy. They're very cautious. So they always have a lot in savings. They're very good at saving, but no one's ever asked them what it is that they're trying to do with those savings. And it's only when you link the two that people then become interested. So when you say, I'm saving because I'd like to buy a house, then you can teach them about, well, how does a mortgage work? What does a mortgage look like? What's it based on? And what are the responsibilities of having a mortgage? What is an interest rate? How long do you repay it over? Why would you have a fixed rate? That becomes interesting because it's something that you're going to do. If you teach that at 14, I don't think anyone would have any interest, to be honest, in a fixed rate versus standard variable. I could tell them all day long and they'd just go over their head. But as soon as you're kind of 20, 23, 24, and you suddenly decide I want to buy a house, then it becomes exciting. And it's those little things as well. It's how to save for a house. So there are means and ways of doing that. You can invest, you can save in cash. There's things like a lifetime ISA. And all these things are just jargon unless it's of interest to you at that time. But it's knowing who to go to and how to get that information. And people still are quite wary of asking for that advice and support. It seems like something we should all know. We should all know how to get a mortgage. But until you've done it once and been through the process, how on earth would you know? Yet we don't talk about it openly. We never sit around a table with friends on an evening and say, well, what's your mortgage rate? Where did you go? Did you use a mortgage broker? We're very cautious about that and very reluctant to talk about money still.
Yeah. It's that kind of, we don't talk about at dinner party: religion, sex, politics, money, death.
Haven't been to my house for dinner.
What else have we missed?
So I guess one thing that's important to me is, yes, it's helping people achieve their goals, but I don't come across many people who tell me that they want to be a millionaire. Often they do things that they're unaware of, and they do charitable activities is a big one for me. So people when I'm going through what do you spend money on, there's always this gap between what you earn and what you spend, and people go, I don't really know where that money goes. And it's often on kind of people giving to charity, monetary wise or time wise. That's a big thing that people do and just, again, don't talk about. Very reluctant to tell people I support this cause or I'm really interested in something. And to me, that is a goal. What do we want to do in terms of helping others is often a massive thing. Personally, it is. Throughout my career, I talked about myself being employed. When I've been employed, I've always started kind of areas of the bank, like a young professionals forum where we help a charity. So in London, we worked with a homeless shelter because it was a huge issue that passed every day. And I was interested, how do you support that? And I always thought you had to wait until you'd made millions and then you could eventually give away some money. But actually, just a bit like the investments that I talk about, it's giving a little and often and using your money in the best ways. So the community foundation that I'm part of in Tyne and Wear, they are great. They've set up a giving circle where they say, well, if we can get 20 young professionals together and you each give £30 a month, it's not just £30 a month. You've multiplied that by 20. It becomes really meaningful for a charity. And you can talk to them about, well, what would you put this money towards? And you can engage with them. And not just offer that money as well, it's offering you time and expertise. Because to be honest, I'm terrible at painting walls. So why would I go into a charity and offer to paint a wall? That's not what I'm good at. What I'm good at is finance and utilizing people's existing kind of resources. So I like to go into charities and say, well, what is it that you need? Is it managing your money, which, to be honest, it's often not. That is helpful if I can help them in that respect. But it's in the employee side. If the employees are engaged and I can talk to them about money and their own personal finances, that's a problem that they can set aside and they can be more focused at work. So that's really what I'm interested in is, and my clients as well, is what is that important to you and how do you give now and what's your plans in the future? So giving during your lifetime and that kind of philanthropic element of giving away on your death, which again, we don't speak about in legacy.
Definitely. That's why you and a previous podcast guest, Cece, you partner up and do webinars around that, don't you?
Yeah, we do. And it's been really good. And Cece's great because it's quite a morbid subject, talking about death, but she does it in a nice human friendly way. So it becomes really impactful. And she's good at raising those questions as well. It's not about when you die, you're leaving things behind. So what do you want to happen and what is your legacy? She's really good at raising those questions.
Yeah, she's good fun. She turns the subjects that are taboo or less talked about into, just like you, something that's it's tied to something. And I think that's, if you're leaving someone behind, you're leaving them with a lot of stress and perhaps there's some financial burden, affairs aren't in order. So by approaching it in that humorous, genuine, authentic kind of way, it makes it more interesting, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, and there's a gap as well in terms of charitable giving, because lots of people are very generous and have direct debits of £10-20 a month. And then lots of people are generous in terms of putting something in their will and leaving this large donation to a charity. But we never bridge that gap and give meaningful amounts during our lifetime when we could actually see it being used and actually engage with the charity. And so that's something I'd like to bring together, is how can you give more meaningfully during your lifetime? And I think where that would start is by talking. So if families talked around a table and decided that actually a cause was really important to them, like a disability charity, because they've been impacted by that, how can they all collectively give and do something in terms of their time, expertise and money while they're still alive, rather than just setting up a £10 donation, which is very, very helpful, but it could be more.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okie dokie. We're going to move on to the quick fire round. So these questions you've not seen yet, and good luck is all I want to say. James, you want to ask the first question?
Question number 1. What kind of cult would you like to start?
The Cult of Ginger Hair Appreciation Society. I think would be a helpful one, because hopefully I could excel in that group. Fingers crossed. God, if there's one thing I could be good at, surely it's got to be that.
Hilarious. Okay, so question number 2. What's the worst advice someone's given to you?
We might have to edit this one, but the worst advice I was ever given was from my mother, who, when I just started going out with my now wife, asked me why I wasn't going to marry her or get married. We were still at university, we'd only been going out for a year. And her advice for that was why not to get married was, well, there's always divorce, which is probably not the best advice to give someone.
Well, nothing's forever.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, the more I hear about your mum, the more I like her.
Yeah, you can keep that one in if you want. She didn't get that.
Shout out to Phil's mum.
We'll not tag her in.
No.
So question number 3, you win £1 million. What is the first thing that you buy?
So firstly, I ring my financial advisor, Phil Lancaster. And I invest all that money with him because he's got my best interests at heart. Or I would just go out and buy, I'd probably buy a flash car, I think. I haven't had that crisis yet. I keep escaping and fleeing the country and going on holidays, but I'd probably buy a Lotus Elise and have that crisis of confidence in a different way.
You could take that to another country as well. So you can achieve both. Flash car.
I don't know if I could tow my caravan on it though. So something a bit more substantial to be towing it.
That's brilliant.
Have the would it?
No. And the question that we ask all of our guests: if we could put you in to the DeLorean, take you back to your 18-year-old self and have a wee chat with him, what advice would you give you? Yeah,
I was thinking about this one, and actually, I think my 18-year-old self was probably quite a good version of me in terms of not the Magaluf 18-year-old. That was a different version, but I think when I was 18, I was a lot more open to change and took more risks and opportunities as they presented them to myself. I guess what I didn't do was plan ahead. So I was quite reactive to opportunities and change. So I'd probably say have more of a plan. It doesn't have to be forever, but have something that you can work towards, because I was just very reactive, like moving to New Zealand and not really knowing where in the country I was actually going to live for the next year. But at least I took the jump. So I think taking those opportunities, but equally, I'd like my 18-year-old self to tell me now to just do more things, be more positive, be more receptive to change. And I think that's always a helpful lesson to look on.
Definitely.
It's very good.
Yes. It ties in somewhat with your mum's advice as well.
No, she doesn't have much good advice, let's be honest.
I'm leaving that bit in, by the way.
No, she's definitely my hero, if you leave that
Me
in.
too. Okay.
So for our listeners, if you would like to get in touch with Philip, follow him. The best place is look for Philip Lancaster with Philip with 1L on LinkedIn. Is apparently the best place to find you.
Yeah, look for the guy with the very Tory picture, apparently. The blue back.
Have I hurt your feelings?
No, it's very funny. It's true. I've got a different picture on LinkedIn. It's a picture of me running.
Ah.
I was quite proud of that. I did the Kielder Marathon. I don't know if you've done that one or if you've been around Kielder.
Yeah.
But it's really quite hilly. For running around a flat lake, you'd think it'd be quite a nice picturesque towpath, but it's really hilly. So I did the marathon around there and basically collapsed at mile 20 and had to walk the rest of it. But it's lovely apart from that last 6 miles. So that's my picture. So it's bittersweet. I'm quite proud of the fact that I actually finished it, but it was torturous as well.
I can imagine.
I blame Lucy Kendall for that as well. It was the Coco sponsored inspired.
We know Lucy well.
Yeah, she's been on the podcast too.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, thank you ever so much for coming on, and it's been absolutely brilliant getting to know you a bit better.
Thank you for letting me talk about myself. It's not something you get to do when you're married to you.
You're married. You are skating on thin ice today.
We're tagging in Mrs. Lancaster.
Yes, we will. Both of them. Awesome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity, and hopefully it's helpful or interesting to other people as well.
Cool.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.